I do want to look, though, at the teams on Tennessee's schedule and their results from this week. Of course, when you beat a team, you'd like to see them do well in the future. And I don't think that necessarily happened with Syracuse this past week. They won 27-20 in overtime against UConn at home. UConn, I want to say, is still pretty solid. They were 9-4 last season, which is one of their better seasons since the dissolution of the Big East as a football conference. But Fran Brown visibly upset by the result on Saturday, even though it was a win. I had the team running sprints in I guess it's called the JMA Wireless Dome now. So not off to a great start with wins aging like fine wine for Tennessee, I don't think.
Yeah, I will say that situation on Twitter with Syracuse running after the game, I love that. I love that, honestly. Seeing a coach that demanded greatness, because, I mean, I think that's one thing that Alabama's missing right now with their team. I mean, Nick Saban, how many times that we see clips of him where they're winning like 49-7, and then they have there's literally 30 seconds left in the game and their defense is not lined up correctly, and then Nick Saban's having a mental breakdown on the sideline. I mean, I feel like that's how you become a great team. And that was one of my concerns about Josh Heupel actually before, because I wondered how hard he was on his team, but I've since heard different stories. I forget what player was, it was a former player, was on a podcast recently, and they were talking about how Josh Heupel's demands greatness out of his players and is, I guess, a lot different than the person that we see in the media rooms. So I don't really have that concern much anymore, but I thought that was a cool scene there with Syracuse. I thought it was a good coaching move right there.
Yeah, and they have harder challenges lying ahead too. I mean, one of the toughest schedules in the country, but that's the first team Tennessee played this year. Looking on down the schedule now, some interesting results. You had Georgia winning 28-6 against Austin Peay. We'll touch on that game later when we do a little bit more of an in-depth preview on Georgia to end the show. Navy defeating UAB 38-24. Service academies are up and down, but I also just don't think UAB is a very good football team, especially seeing that they won 52-42 against Alabama State in week 1. Now, here's one that caught my eye on Saturday night, and that's Mississippi State 24, Arizona State 20. Keep your eyes on this game here in the next 3 or 4 weeks. We'll see what happens with them against Northern Illinois and Alcorn State in the next 2. I don't anticipate there being much coming out of those games other than Mississippi State dominating. But they aired it out in this game. They had 2 receivers go for 100-plus yards. Now, they did not defend the run well. I think Arizona State ran for like 250 on them, which that is also something to keep in mind for when Tennessee goes down there. But it doesn't look like Mississippi State is going to be the free pass it was last season to SEC teams.
Yeah, no, it was a weird weekend for college football because, I mean, I think some of the teams that we were worried about heading into the season, I mean, they haven't looked as impressive to start off as I think that we would expect. I mean, Georgia, they only scored 28 points last week against Austin Peay, which I was a little shocked by that. I mean, we just saw Tennessee last week score 72 points against ETSU. Now, I do think that Austin Peay is a better FCS team than ETSU, but still, you would imagine Georgia to be able to put up more than just 28 points there. And then, too, like Vanderbilt, too, was shocking to me. I mean, they were, I think it was like 20-10 at one point. They were down and then end up winning, I think, 44-20 to finish the game.
They ended up blowing them out. So that was a little bit of a surprise too. I'll get to that one in a second. But yeah, you're right about Georgia, and I think a lot of that had to do with rain delays. Like that was a little bit of a problem down there in Athens, more so than in Knoxville this weekend. We were anticipating rain delays. We did not get them, fortunately. But yeah, a bit of an odd win for Georgia for sure. moving on down here, you have Arkansas winning 56-14 in their first ever meeting against Arkansas State. Taylor Green threw 2 interceptions, which is not great. I haven't looked back and see what happened exactly on those plays, but still a nice win for them. They have no cupcakes the rest of the way, though. It's Memphis, Notre Dame, and 8 SEC games for them that's left. I think Alabama was a little upset. They won 73-0 against ULM. Ty Simpson, 0 incompletions. We'll see how they do against SEC opponents. I'll tell you what, Kentucky is exactly who I thought they were. 30-23 loss to Ole Miss. They always play Ole Miss close. Zach Calzada's still not overly impressive throwing the ball. They ran the ball okay, did their little ball control thing that Mark Stoops likes to do up there in Lexington. Ole Miss ran all over them. Austin Simmons made some mistakes in that game for Ole Miss that led to a couple of Kentucky turnovers, but that's the one game that I'm looking at right now that I just absolutely do not see a way Tennessee loses in SEC play.
Well, even when Kentucky's at their best, Tennessee still does not lose to Kentucky. So, I mean, even if they were to win against Ole Miss, I still would not be scared of the Wildcats whenever Tennessee has to play against them. But how about that Florida game that I know that every Tennessee fan was keeping an eye on this game? What were your thoughts about that, Tucker?
Oh, dear. They got problems in the swamp again. 18-16 loss to USF. And here's the thing. USF, I would say, of all the group of 5 teams this year, if you had to give me just one team that could get in out of the group of 5 into the college football playoff, it would be USF. I think Memphis is a worthy contender as well. We'll see what they do the rest of the year. As a matter of fact, USF is at Memphis, which is a very intriguing group of 5 matchup later on in the season. But it's going to be somebody out of an American conference this year because the Mountain West is just not good enough right now. Not good enough to be getting a team in. Boise State certainly not after being beat head-to-head by USF. That suddenly creates a very intriguing matchup between USF and Miami next weekend down there in Hard Rock Stadium. But, man, that's 2 weeks in a row that we've seen – a team like Alabama or Florida go down that Tennessee is prone to losing to over the years, especially on the road. And it's just like, well, they're not exactly who we thought they were. They're a little too hyped up going into the season. And they paid the price too. They absolutely paid the price. But I think Florida's loss is definitely worse though, because it was at home. I think Alex Golesh may be coaching his way into an SEC job vacancy here in the next year or two, so we shall see what exactly happens there. But yeah, it was wild because we were watching that finish at Gus's, so I had some very happy people munching on their hoagie bread and Philly cheesesteaks and all that fun stuff. But yeah, always a good week to see the Gators lose. It's been a generational hate watching year for Tennessee fans, and we're only 2 weeks into the season. A few more teams on the schedule here that I hadn't mentioned yet. Oklahoma beat Michigan 24-13. I think Michigan's offensive line is not great. I'd have to ask our boy TJ about that. Bryce Underwood, 9 of 24, 142 yards for Michigan is not great. They did have one long touchdown run, but overall I think just 1 or 2 chunk plays for Michigan the entire game, including that one. John Mateer made like one mistake on an overthrow that led to an interception, but he had 3 touchdowns total in this game, 1 passing, 2 rushing. So the guy can make plays with his legs. So I'm excited to see what they do in SEC play, but there's some juice out there in Norman this year that was not there last year. And just a couple more to mention here before we wrap up with the other teams on Tennessee's schedule. You had New Mexico State beating Tulsa 21-14. Good for New Mexico State. I don't think they're a very good football team. And then lastly, you mentioned it earlier, but Vanderbilt 44, Virginia Tech 20. I don't know what to make of Vanderbilt right now. I don't think Virginia Tech's a very good football team. Their offense has looked lackluster 2 weeks in a row against SEC teams. They were at least okay defensively against South Carolina. They were not against Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt had like 260 rush yards against them. And that's Vandy's biggest road win against a Power 4 opponent, I believe, since Kentucky in 2012. So, pretty monster win for the boys in West End and Diego Pavia. But all that said, I still think the only game that's a certainty for them right now in the SEC is a win at home against Kentucky. I look at the schedule. Mizzou and Auburn are not who we thought they were. LSU could still be tough. And then you factor in the road schedule, which is also very difficult. So I do think they're going to stay close to where they were last season, but at the same time, it's just hard for me to envision Vandy winning more than 7, at the very most 8 games in a regular season.
Yeah, I mean, this definitely isn't like your traditional 2-10 Vanderbilt team that we've seen in years past. I mean, I do think that Vanderbilt, they probably are going to be about as good as they were last season. I could see them getting an upset win during the season. But like as far as whenever they come into Knoxville, I think that there was so much crap talked by Diego Pavia, and there was those clips I think from the SEC TV show that I have not seen yet about them like putting ultra focus on Tennessee with the coaching staff and everything. I just don't see a scenario where Vanderbilt's competitive against Tennessee. And honestly, based on what happened last season, with the addition of all the crap that Diego Pavia has been talking, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Tennessee's 2 best defensive performances of the season would be against Vanderbilt and Arkansas. Now, that Arkansas game, I think Tennessee's going to put it on them for what happened last year. And Vanderbilt, I think it could be the same story too, especially being in Knoxville too. I imagine that's going to be one of the louder games of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. One more bonus round game for you. UNLV 30, UCLA 23. I got home just in time to see the finale of that game, see Nico throw his pick. He threw 1 touchdown pass in that game. And it was a very short one. It was like a wheel route maybe. And then he ran for one that was pretty long, so I guess you could call that impressive. But he had to stat pad a little bit in this game because they got down in a hole early. I think when we were driving back, it was 23-0 at one point in favor of UNLV. UNLV is not a bad team in the Mountain West, but by no means a team UCLA should be losing to.
Yeah, I know UNLV was ranked at one point last season. I mean, so not a terrible team. But man, I saw this meme earlier today on Twitter that made me laugh. It was like it had a picture of like Owen Wilson, then had someone else named Owen, and then had a picture of Nico, and it said Owen too, which was pretty nice to see.
Very nice.
But I didn't actually get to see anything from that game. So I mean, I don't know how Nico performed. Of course, I saw that they lost the game, but I would assume that Nico still had around 200 yards passing, maybe even a little bit less. His traditional stats for games.
Yeah, I think it was like 250 this time around. It
was really?
Well, they had to throw their way back into the game, Jordan. You know they can't run the ball.
Well, I mean, honestly, 250, that's probably like what his second highest total besides like the Chattanooga game.
I'm going to need to look back at the game log, but that's a lot more than what he did in the average SEC game last season. He did throw for like 290 against Kentucky, but that's because, his receivers could have helped him out a little bit in that game. But, yeah, they were just still out of sync. Out of sync all of last season on offense. He's still out of sync there. They play New Mexico next week. It would be very funny if they lost that game. Not thinking Tennessee will look over Mississippi State now. I don't. Yeah, Mississippi State will be hosting Tennessee as its first SEC game of the season. So I don't see that as a possibility, fortunately. And also there's the thing with Josh Heupel and Jeff Lebby. So there's some motivation to not lose to your former associate, I would say, from Josh Heupel and company. Okay, looking at the polls for this week, it's funny. Tennessee won by 19 against Syracuse last week, only moved up 2 spots. Won by 55 against East Tennessee State this week, moved up 7 spots to number 15. That feels like a pretty appropriate rating, if I had to say. Some other notes in the poll. I think the LSU-Clemson showdown in week 1 might have been a little bit overblown. Neither of those teams look good this week. LSU sitting at number 3. They beat Louisiana Tech, who's had a coach on the hot seat for like 2 years now, 23-7. And their offense did not look good in that game. Defensively, they were fine, but their offense did not look good against Louisiana Tech. And then Clemson, and we were watching bits and pieces of that game, Jordan. They were down, 16 at one point? They had to go on a run there to win that game 27-16 at home against Troy of all teams. I definitely don't think either Carolina school belongs where they're sitting right now in the poll, just because South Carolina, 38-10 win against South Carolina State is what it is. But what if I told you 3 of the 5 touchdowns scored by South Carolina in that game did not come from the offense? You had 1 scoop and score, and then you had 2 punt return touchdowns, which were, of course, Beamer specials. And, good for having a good special teams and defense, but the Lenore Sellers hype is just a little confusing to me right now. I'm still not buying it. There's some potential. There's absolutely some potential, but I don't understand why people are hyping him up as this Heisman-worthy quarterback when he is clearly not that right now. Just a few more notes of the poll here. USF jumping in at number 18 overall, which is, I think, somewhat deserving. I would have put them a little bit further down the poll than 18, but good for them for getting in. Mizzou and Auburn are in there now. Auburn looked a little sloppy this week, even though they won by 39 against Ball State. I want to say there were like 5 sacks that they gave up in that game to a team like Ball State, which is not great. And let me tell you, Mizzou might have itself an offense, and we might have been sleeping on Mizzou again. I actually think they could have potential to do more if that offense is, in fact, that good in SEC play than what many of us were thinking going into the season. Teams demoted from the poll. Arizona State this week. They kind of looked rough in week 1 against Northern Arizona too, which is, I think, a big part of the rationale there. SMU for losing to Baylor in overtime. And, of course, the Florida Gators.
Yeah, it's pretty nice to see them fall out. I feel like Tennessee fans always win when Florida loses. It is interesting to see South Florida there at 18 now. I'm a little okay with it, honestly. It's just funny to see them ahead of Alabama now, which, man, did you ever, 5 years ago, would you ever have expected USF being ahead of Alabama?
Well, here's what's funny, man. They played Alabama in that home and home the last 2 seasons, and they gave Alabama a game both times. They didn't score much in the first game, but Bama only won 17-3 in 2023 down there in Tampa. And then you look at the game in Tuscaloosa last season. I want to say Bama was either just ahead or just down, a lot of lead changes going on for the first 3 quarters of that game. Now, Bama ended up winning decisively in the end, but who's to say they couldn't do it if they hosted that game this year, USF, that is. So, USF getting into the poll is impressive. And that truly was a sleeping giant for a while in the group of 5 ranks, because you mentioned BJ Daniels and Quentin Flowers to me this weekend. Those are some names of past great quarterbacks at USF that have been gone for a little bit now, but Alex Golesh doing some good work down there in Tampa, something that they just haven't seen in a long time.